The city has invested heavily in video surveillance, and it clearly helped in this situation last weekend. Now, as we move forward into this coming weekend, we have beefed up, added additional officers. Both Minneapolis and Metro Transit has agreed to send a significant number of officers downtown just to have a presence to ward off any incidents. We just want to make sure that the public feels safe down here and that we draw crowds back downtown. I've had a lot of conversations over the weekend and this week with businesses that are extremely concerned about how this affects them. And obviously it affects the city as a whole whenever we have these incidents, and we do not want to see anything similar in the future. At this point, I'll stop, and if you have any questions, I'll answer if I can.
Council members, any questions of the inspector? Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. I know that there's been some conversations about what do we do about bar close and closing time, and how do we prevent this surge of everybody closing at the same time and coming out on the streets. Have we made much progress in developing our plan and how to maybe help stretch that out a little bit? I'm just curious, a little brief update maybe on
Sure.
What the best strategy you think is and where you think we should go with that.
Well, there's a great debate that takes place with regard to that, whether the answer is to have extended hours where you go later into the night and see if that kind of disperses the crowds at a slower pace coming out. There's a lot of debate over that. It's kind of what took place when we went from a 1 o'clock closing hour to a 2 o'clock closing hour. It would definitely need to be organized in a fashion that really stretches that time out. It didn't seem to make. I was actually working in the downtown area when it went from 1 to 2, and or at least in the early stages of the 2 a.m. closing, and all it did is extend the time that people spent drinking, and it didn't change what happened after bar close. You still had large crowds going out into the streets. So that's one issue, is when you talk about trying to change the hours. And there is discussions going on with that. We are doing a study downtown right now of not just that, everything that plays into it, whether it's traffic control, sidewalk size, parking lots. There's a significant amount of things that play into that entire issue of how do you shut down the bar time, and what's the best way to do it, or do you shut it down at all? But that is being studied heavily. It definitely, we do use a lot of traffic plans when the traffic comes to a standstill because of pedestrians exiting and they can't move traffic through the area. There's the city, we chose to change the traffic flow over there years ago, and we need to look back at that. I believe there's some changes that could be made that could assist. Right now, First Avenue is a two-way street. It was a one-way street. Hennepin was a one-way. It is a two-way now. All of those issues play into traffic management and pedestrian management, and how you move that around so that people aren't stuck sitting there. And whether it's pedestrians or vehicles, it does become a concern when you cannot move. So that definitely is being looked at right now. We are testing a few things. We're testing a larger sidewalk on First Avenue between 5th and 6th, just to see how it impacts moving people around, and what the businesses, how they feel about that. DID is funding a few different studies downtown right now, and we're working hand in hand with them to see what makes it better, because we don't want to take an action that makes it worse. Right now, we're managing it through police resources and traffic control agents working late into the night just to keep everything moving down there. And you need that flow, because that also provides for emergency vehicles if you need one. So it definitely is a challenge.
Council members, any other questions? All right, Inspector Jost, we'll have you sit for a little while. If questions do arise, we'll bring you up again. But I'm going to introduce Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members the City Council, thank you very much for having me. I am Mike Freeman, Hennepin County Attorney. As a result of the activities that the inspector just talked about, two individuals, Maurice Carter and Detroit Davis Riley, have each been charged with 9 counts of first-degree assault, that is, assaulting police officers. They shot directly at police officers, alleged in the complaints. There's a warrant out for a third individual who may have shot at civilians, which name is being withheld until that person's apprehended. Let me just say first off that I think Minneapolis police do an outstanding job downtown. It's a very difficult situation. All sorts of people get out at 2 o'clock in the morning, many of whom have been in the bars for quite a while, and many of whom are not ready to go home at that time. I think the police presence that both Councilmember Fry and the office and the inspector commented upon is significant. But let me also share with you my view from talking with fellow prosecutors across the country, the National District Attorneys Association. And they're kind of amazed and impressed by the number of things we do. Let me just tell you what my office has been involved in with different people concerned about this issue. First, both Minneapolis Police and the United States Attorney's Office and mine work very closely on felon in possession cases. If you commit a serious felony, you can't carry a handgun. And we find that too often the people who do commit handguns are either shooters or being shot at. The law is very clear. The penalty should be 5 years. It's not that all the time as Council President Johnson and I wish it were. But we work very hard on that. We coordinate very closely with the United States Attorney's Office. Number two, we've worked very hard on robbery, assault, and theft cases. I'm not at liberty to extend very much, but we're working very closely with MPD on a number of cases that we believe fit into a pattern. I can't say more than that because we haven't been able to charge them yet. The Minneapolis Police is working very hard on them. We work on all sorts of livability crimes with the City Attorney's Office. There are additional probation officers available to move folks along. Heading Home Hennepin is an attempt to provide housing for our homeless people. We've done a much better job, although we still have work to do, about people whose problem is not criminality, but homelessness, alcoholism, and mental health issues. Number 5, the Youth Coordinating Council, of which both Hennepin County and Minneapolis are major players, have done a wonderful job with their counselors, particularly in the summertime. And we find that this kind of juvenile crime that many people were concerned about downtown has been much diminished over the anticipations. And that's a great service because that's young people working with young people saying, hey, enjoy your downtown, but do it in a safe way. And finally, my hat's off to the Downtown Council and their ambassadors, those wonderful people who are there cleaning the streets, giving directions, and providing presence, really sets the stage for a healthy downtown. Now, let me anticipate a question. My days of being at bars at closing time are long past. Councilmember President Johnson, are yours past as well? But it seems to me that, as the inspector said, moving it from 1 to 2 just pushed it off an hour. And to folks in greater Minnesota, people say, I don't want to come downtown. I think Minneapolis downtown is vibrant at night. It's fun to go to a show. It's great to go to Target Field, particularly if the Twins are winning, or Target Center if the T-Wolves will win, and then go out and have a drink afterwards. But my suggestion to my friends are, why don't you leave about 1? Or why don't you leave about 1:15 before the rush at bar closing? Now, the bar owners may not like that because maybe I'm suggesting that people leave the bars earlier. But I think that's a viable solution for folks who just want to get out of there. Notwithstanding that suggestion, and that's all it is, people have a right to participate in legal activities downtown, including staying at a bar until 2 o'clock in the morning. I guess I just should assure you that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and MPD and the rest are working pretty hard trying to make that. No one has ever been able to shut down crime entirely. We know that crime has bumped back up, okay? It had an unprecedented drop over a 6-year period of time. It's increased everywhere. Baltimore has already exceeded the number of homicides in September that they had all of last year. And so have a number of other communities. Nobody can really explain all this. If we could, we'd probably do something about it. The one thing that we know, and we're very aggressive about, is trying to keep guns out of the hands of felons. And if anybody's got more suggestions, I'm happy to hear them. I think, Mr. Chairman, that we're trying to do just about everything we can do. Unfortunately, Americans are a violent society. We have more guns than we have people. And that's kind of crazy when you think about it. And I say that from the perspective of a man who's trained and served in the military and knows how to handle a long gun and a handgun, and a person who's a hunter. But I don't carry a handgun because I shouldn't, because I don't use it every day. And I trust these fine officers to keep me safe, and I think you can as well. Questions?
Councilmember Gordon.
Well, you mentioned guns and the challenges there, and I'm wondering if you have any recommendations that you might give to the legislature or anybody so that maybe we could improve the way that we regulate guns. We actually, as a city, are prohibited from doing any kind of gun control initiatives of our own, so we really are relying on the state legislature. And this is just kind of a softball question to see if you want to advocate for any changes at the state level.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Gordon, thank you. In cooperation with the Minneapolis Police Department, back in 1993, we had a program called Drop Your Guns. We collected over 6,000 guns voluntarily turned in. And we got some guns off the street. We also got the dialogue going about why people shouldn't be carrying guns all the time. It's been suggested we should do that again. And there have been smaller programs since then. Here's the problem. At the time we did Drop Your Guns, then Chief Locks, wonderful man, and I agreed that we would not ask the collectors of the guns to review the serial numbers and not check them to see if they'd been committed in crimes. Our feeling was if a gun had really been committed in a crime, it was probably in the bottom of the Mississippi already. And we didn't want to stop and interfere with collecting guns merely to check for ones that may have been stolen or used in crime. I think we were right. Litigation that concerned after the program was completed in legislation means that in practically any gun collection program like that, you have to review each and every gun. You have to record the registration number. You have to go back, find out if it's in a crime. You have to find out who the owner is. You have to return it. Drives the price of it way to the sky. It's really not a viable alternative. What we can do, particularly with our kids, say guns shouldn't be used to resolve disputes. If you don't mind the personal story. I went to Seward School. And in sixth grade, like a lot of other stupid sixth graders, I got into a fight or two. If you happen to notice, the nose isn't straight. But you know something? I got a bloody nose and a broken nose, but I'm here talking to you today. And too often today, the dispute is resolved with a gun, and it shouldn't be. We got to talk to our kids. Parents have to do that. Coaches have to do it. City council members, county attorneys. We collectively have to enhance the dialogue about why carrying guns to solve disputes makes no sense. You can have a dispute, you can have a busted nose, but I want the people back instead of in a box.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Freeman, for being here. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done in being really aggressive about the prohibited person in possession of a firearm. And, you know, you've been helpful in helping us as a community on the north side raise that particular issue. And, you know, I see that kind of being discussed a bit across the country, too. Our experience is no different than other cities, that frequently the people that are involved in shootings are people, you know, that have past histories of being involved in with guns. And so it isn't a big shock. But I just think that, you know, that standard of getting the people that are violent like this and using weapons off the streets is really, really important, and you know, can make a dent when paired with the prevention efforts that we use for juveniles, the ability to turn your life around, help for people who, have challenges and opportunities for people as well. But at some point it reaches when people have multiple times used guns to endanger, obviously, not just, the people that are immediately around them, but in the case of, what goes on in our downtown, what goes on in some neighborhoods, the general public, people are shooting at grocery stores. It's crazy. So that kind of person does not belong on our streets, and I really appreciate the work you've done on that. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman, quick question before I give it over to Councilmember Palmisano. We're talking about what happened downtown, but there was a shooting on the north side as well just this past weekend. And is there progress on that one? I mean, without sharing too much details.
Yeah, there is progress, Mr. Chairman. We have some limitations about what we can share. Let me assure you we're moving forward on that with the great help. I mean, my hat's off to MPD. The Sheriff's Office is a great partner. Metropolitan Transit is a good partner. State Troopers are partners. And the United States Attorney. So the six of us, 6 groups, are working hard on these.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, and I'm not sure if Attorney Freeman or Inspector Coase would be best to answer it, but I want to show my appreciation for all of the wraparound services that we have here and how we look at bar closed downtown from a police perspective, from things like traffic flow to 18 officers being in the immediate vicinity to officers running at a gunman. That's, I think, overlooked in these kinds of situations where people are just outraged because downtown is a destination, but it's also a place where increasingly higher and higher numbers of people want to live. So it's a livability issue too. Pushing bar time, as you said, Inspector, pushes the process of this gradual shutdown of the city by an hour. And are we also saying that there's no correlation that change in bar time has over, the amount of apprehension we've done of people with prohibited arms? Or do we feel that increasing the very late night activity downtown has had a correlation of more guns downtown on people that shouldn't have them?
Madam Chair, Council Member, I'm going to defer to my friend, the Inspector, who I think is much more authoritative on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. I don't think that the hour of closing really has that much of an effect on whether someone's going to have a gun or not downtown. The one area that it may play into is if people have been at a business or a bar or something like that, and then return to their vehicle and then return to out in the general public. That has been a pattern in the past where people may wander around throughout the evening and kind of identify who's downtown, especially if it's somebody that you have a beef with, and then try to figure out where each other's parked, and then either get into a fight, as the attorney pointed out earlier, or bring a weapon into that situation. But the hour of closing isn't necessarily the deciding factor as to whether they would bring a weapon out or not. It really comes down to the individuals that happen to be downtown, or actually anywhere, and what their beef is and how they choose to settle it. But what does happen is when you move the hours of closing later and later, or either direction, it affects when you have to staff your personnel. And it's an awful lot of resources from the police department. Definitely, we beef up. It's one of the busiest hours of any day, is that hour. Definitely the crossover a half hour before bar close to probably the hour after bar close is potentially the most difficult hour of the day for the police department, is dealing with many people that have overindulged, people that just don't want to go home yet. They're not ready to leave. So it definitely affects your staffing and your tactics. at that time of day, and how long you can put up with a crowd that just will not leave, and you start having fights, and you need to stop that poor behavior before it escalates. But the actual hour of when it closes probably is not that impactful as to whether or not they would be willing to carry a weapon.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you. And I had another question, Inspector, that maybe you can answer. Are people allowed to carry firearms in the clubs and in the bars and in the restaurants downtown?
I believe that would be up to each individual business if they were to post, that they don't allow weapons inside of each place. Most of the establishments down here that are late night do not want weapons. Some of the bars do have scanning. You have to walk through scanners of some sort. Some of the bouncers actually use scanning devices to check people as they're coming in, and they announce it. They let people know that they're doing that. But it's not a standard that is an absolute requirement that each establishment block anyone from coming in with a weapon. No, it's not.
Okay, that would be interesting. I think that there are some instances where it's a condition of a license that gets imposed. So maybe that's something we just have to think about, how often we do that, and as a council or where to do that, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I'm also curious, there are some restaurants, aren't there, downtown that are open after hours or even 24 hours? Is there a place to go eat?
Yes.
So we don't actually say you have to close, or maybe we sell some of the bars that they have to close. I'm not quite sure on their condition of their license. They probably need a special extended hours license to stay open longer. But I think one of the theories was stop serving alcohol, but we'll let you stay open longer so that you don't have to turn on your lights and kick everybody out all at the same time. So you said, yes, there are some places that are open later all night. And I think part of the idea is that we're not asking, the solution isn't to extend the hours that you can serve alcohol, but maybe just extend the hours you could remain open to try to soften the exiting. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of talk this year specifically about that issue. There are a few establishments that stay open all night long. Nicollet Diner at 15th and Nicollet is an all-night open restaurant. Then most of the right downtown area is pizza places, and they stay open an hour or two later past bar close. And the majority of the people are just walk-up customers. They get a slice of pizza and move on. So there are several of those establishments downtown. The bars do have the option of applying for an extended hours for food. Very few of the bigger establishments have chosen to do so. And we do have a lot of discussion about that. In fact, today, right at this moment, there's what's called a link. It's a liquor meeting with all the bar owners, and police and licensing is taking place in the first precinct right now as we're talking. And it always comes up, in the discussion as to, are any of you planning to extend your hours for this purpose? And really, most of the larger establishments have decided not to do so, that they make their income off of liquor sales, and that keeping people that have been drinking all night in your establishment to sell them a meal doesn't appeal to many of them. There is some commentary about, at least if they could keep their entertainment going, they may want to keep it going. But at this point, I don't think there's very many bars that have applied to keep going with a late night license. But it is open at this point to all of them. They can apply for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano?
Inspector, how might the presence of individual police body cameras affect our ability to make bar close safer? Or given the amount of video surveillance downtown, as you stated, do you anticipate it not having an effect? I've been through several settlement conferences and other kinds of situations where I have seen video proof of people that are drunk harassing police officers. So how do you think the implementation of individual body cameras would affect bar close, or don't you think it will?
As a whole, even beyond just the close, I think that the body cameras would capture both the citizen and the officer's behaviors in their interactions throughout the night, not just at bar close. And it definitely would capture some of the behavior that today isn't captured and is only reported by the eyes of the officer. Obviously, we do believe the officers in what they're reporting, but it does paint a picture to the public when you see on video what really is the hectic nature of doing law enforcement and the crowd and dealing with crowd issues. You're always going to miss something with a camera where if you're pointing this way and your head's looking that way. So there'll always be issues of whether the camera was pointing in the right direction or if it captured it or didn't capture it. So there'll be other legal issues that will come up with the use of body cameras. But I do think it's a good preventative measure to be able to, for both sides, to be able to capture and see what took place. I don't know that it'll have an immediate effect, but I think down the road, as you move forward and you have more and more instances that were captured and we're able to demonstrate to the public what took place and what we were dealing with and the actions of the officer, it will be beneficial to the city as a whole. But I really couldn't predict whether it's going to alter actual crime numbers or incidents that take place. But it definitely would be a deterrent and something we would use as a city to demonstrate that we are capturing incidents and try to steer people towards good behavior as opposed to poor behavior. I hope I answered your question.
Might it help to increase the amount of evidence we have to be able to bring charges against somebody sooner?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It would help in that area.
Thank you.
Inspector Jost, I have a question for you with regards to, much more of a hypothetical than anything. People talk about a situation like that, what happened in downtown, and, I'm wondering, how could we have prevented this from happening? And, I ask that in the sense that, sometimes, these things just happen randomly. If ShotSpotter could locate the people who were about to shoot something, we'd probably go apprehend those folks really quickly, but in a lot of instances, these things happen randomly. Is there anything we could have done to prevent this from happening?
Well, it is a free society, so I wish that I could just come up with a solution that definitely would prevent this. But when you consider how many police officers were right there at the time of this, and you try to think, well, does presence prevent it? Does different types of police prevent it? It's really a societal issue going on right here that there are people that are willing to take that risk, whether it's injury from being shot, incarceration from being captured. And there still are people that are willing to take this terrible action and publicly commit a crime that very likely they're going to be captured and prosecuted, and yet they still went forward with it. So, obviously prevention is the best measure. And that is really the goal of the police officers working down there, is to prevent incidents from taking place and being visible and trying to take action before things get out of hand. And that's really what we do down there on a nightly basis. And the reality is we prevent these incidents nightly. There's a lot of tactics we take downtown that they don't get reported on because it didn't happen. And, much of what we've done this year has been crime prevention. We had some incidents happening along 2nd Avenue where as people were leaving downtown, they were firing off guns. We had several shooting incidents along 2nd and 3rd. And so, we did things like we removed parking over there at that time of the night because it allowed people that weren't partaking in downtown and an easy escape to park in that area. And it has, we've also placed mobile cameras and at those intersections over there. They're trailers that light up and have recording systems on there. And, it's greatly seen a huge reduction in the number of shots fired incidents right at those locations. But yet, from time to time, there's someone that's willing to risk it and shoot off a gun as they're leaving downtown. But we have seen, great reductions there. The other things we've done is done some saturation at that time of night where we have officers very visible with lights flashing out on foot over there just to make sure that we're not having those incidents. But in the end, it really comes down to a personal choice And I can't say enough about this particular incident last weekend. The officers ran towards these incidents. They may have initially hit the deck just to, dive for cover, like as everyone was doing at the moment, but immediately pursued these individuals. And that's a pretty strong message that officers will pursue you, even if they can't return fire because there's pedestrians and there's other people there. They still did their job and did an exceptional job. So very proud of what was done by the police department last weekend.
Thank you. County Attorney Freeman, if you can step up, I have one question for you. I'm going to ask it while you're walking up here. These gun incidents that happen, I mean, just like the one that happened in downtown, but I mean, there are countless gun incidents that happen on the north side. And, with regard to your office and the prosecutions, how are you all treating this? I mean, are you asking for the maximums? What is the response from your office with regard to these gun incidents?
Mr. Chairman, we do ask for the maximum sentence permissible in over 90% of the gun felon in possession cases. If one of our assistant prosecutors files a case and has a gun, they are not eligible to dismiss that gun unless it's personally approved by me or one of the two deputies. That's how seriously we take it. Now, obviously, with 12,000 adult felonies and 10,000 juvenile cases, the county attorney and the two deputies can't review every case, and we don't. But we take the gun cases very seriously. And in fact, the record in the county attorney's office of not asking for the maximum sentence in a gun case is around 10%. You might say, why is it 10%? Well, sometimes the case begins to go south, and we have to plead it out to get the best we can. Sometimes we didn't know that the person who was supposedly there is working undercover for a whole series of things, and we have to dismiss that. That does occur. 10% is about right.